first thing we're going to do today is a role play on the carbon cycle so we can understand how carbon dioxide is playing into climate change. Because you guys probably know that there's a connection between carbon dioxide in our atmosphere and climate change. Each of you are going to be a player in our carbon cycle. So you're going to be rock. You're going to put that around your neck with the numbers outside. Laura, you rock. And then we have soil.
You get a lot more.
but you don't soil.
So what are producers? You guys know what producers are?
They produce things.
Like what?
Grass.
Grass.
They produce their.
So plants are big time producers.
That's huge.
We only get 3 compounds though, the rockets.
So you'd be the fossil fuel consumer.
It's so bad.
You'd be a fossil fuel deposit. And you're going to be deforestation. All right, now some of you get pom-poms.
Atmosphere. Can I be an atmosphere? Yeah.
Sure, if you want to do that. I'm going to give you 3.
Negotiation.
You want to eat? So I have some questions. We're going to have a role play, but I'm going to kind of give you some guiding questions so you can figure out who you're going to be passing to during this role play. Each one of these represents 1 unit of carbon, and this carbon is constantly cycled through ecosystems. Okay? So carbon is present in our atmosphere, right? We have atmosphere has some carbon here. And plants actually take up carbon from the air and incorporate it into sugars using photosynthesis. Have y'all learned about photosynthesis before? Okay, and then, so that gives plants the energy they need to grow, and then animals can eat plants to get that carbon from the plants for our own bodies. So the way that we all get carbon is ultimately from plants, and that carbon ultimately came from the atmosphere. So, we have this movement of carbon from the atmosphere to producers, to our plants. So who needs to pass to represent this process of carbon moving from the atmosphere to producers?
Wait, I have to give it to her?
Yeah, so you will. So not yet, but when we start the role play, the person that you're going to pass to in the role play is always going to be, tell me your name again? Maggie. Maggie.
Okay.
Okay, so that's who you're going to pass to in this role play. So for right now, just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Okay. So then consumers, like we obtain carbon by eating producers. And we're going to kind of leave the animal
Is this
component
carbon?
out of this. Yeah, the black
Okay.
represents carbon, 1 unit of carbon.
It's also a lot of carbon.
Okay, what happens when a plant or an animal dies?
Decompose.
They decompose, right? So
And then
they
it goes into the soil.
very good. So who do we need to have? Who are you gonna? Who is the producer? Right, the producer during the role play. You're gonna pass carbon to the soil. Okay, so the soil is a huge reservoir of carbon because of all the organic material that's sitting there
And plants.
and being decomposed. So the carbon ultimately is going to come out of the soil in the form of CO2 and go back to the atmosphere. Okay? All right, so I want us to do a role play now. Who are the 3 key players in what we just went over?
Atmosphere, producers, and
Soil. You remember? Okay, 1, 2, 3. So it'll seem kind of elementary at first, but maybe just do.
Oh, we keep going.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Let's do a couple more cycles. All right, let's stop and see how many we have. Okay, so you each have the same amount you started with, right?
Yeah.
Good. So that represents a stable carbon cycle. Okay, we have this kind of normal movement of carbon from the atmosphere to producers to the soil and back to the atmosphere. Now, humans weren't really a part of this, were they? Okay, so that's what we need to bring in next, is we need to look at how humans are altering the carbon cycle, which is what we're doing. So one question I have for you is, these guys over here have a big stores of carbon, 15 carbon units compared to, say, your 3, so that's a lot. The rock, 105,000 carbon units compared to the atmosphere. So all these numbers are kind of relative to one another, so you can get a sense of where the most carbon is. So why didn't they participate in the role play? You know, even though they had carbon?
Because they weren't releasing it?
They weren't releasing the carbon? And that's right, they're very, they can release carbon very slowly. Rock releases carbon, it takes a really long time for that carbon to come out of the rock into the carbon cycle. Fossil fuels, where did fossil fuels come from? Do you guys know?
burning fossil.
We burn fossil fuels.
Right, yeah, so.
But where did they, how did they get there in the first place?
I think I know.
Dinosaurs?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I lost it. Like, isn't it like fossils, like of plants and animals and stuff?
Mhm.
I was gonna say.
So basically, it's the organic remains of plants and animals that lived millions of years ago. So
That's weird.
it is. It's buried deep down underneath the earth. It's not, it's a big store of carbon. And what humans are now doing is tapping into those fossil fuels for our own energy. So some people call it like liquid sun in a sense, because it's giving us carbon in a way differently, say, than plants do. So now we're going to add the human component to our carbon cycle. And we have two things going on here. We have deforestation is a big player in why the carbon cycle is getting altered. What does deforestation mean?
D of forest.
Cutting down trees and burning the trees, okay? And how about fossil fuel consumer? Who are fossil fuel consumers?
Everybody.
We are, right? Everybody. So what's an example of a fossil fuel?
Me, coal.
Coal. The others, gas. Oil. So typically coal, gas, oil, those are typically considered our fossil fuels. What's the connection between fossil fuels and CO2?
When you burn it, it produces CO2.
Right, so when we burn fossil fuels, we release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So you can get a sense of where we're going now, right? Because in our next step here, we're going to start burning. So what I want us to happen here, we're going to set up for our next role play where we look at how humans are impacting it. During the role play, the fossil fuel consumer, which is you, you're going to go up and take 3 pom-poms at a time from the fossil fuel deposit, and you're going to give them to the atmosphere. You're going to represent the burning of fossil fuels. Deforestation, then, why do people cut down trees?
To use space for farms and houses.
Okay, farms, houses, agriculture is a big one,
Lumber.
especially in developing countries. They need to make room to grow cows and other animals for meat.
I love growing cows.
Okay, so when we start the role play, the deforestation person is going to remove 1 pom-pom from the producer. And what are you going to do with it?
Give it to atmosphere.
Right, so that's what you're going to do during the role play.
Okay.
So all of you are doing something with just one other person. Can you remember who that person is? 1, 2, 3. So remember what you're supposed to do. I'm just going to let you go a couple cycles.
You're supposed to be passing through.
Oh.
Yeah, the fossil fuel consumer gets 3 from the deposits to the atmosphere. So just keep passing a couple more times.
Golly.
All right, let's stop here.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, that's right. Let's see what happened. Atmosphere, good gosh. Look at that atmosphere. A lot of carbon in there. And so where did that carbon come from?
Came from deforestation and the fossil fuel consumers.
Good. And let's look at our other players here. Look at our producers. Wow, because of deforestation, we have fewer producers. Soil,
1 less.
a little bit less, okay. Rock, still there. What about, uh-oh, she's out of fossil fuels. That's interesting. What does that mean?
It means
You can't produce.
it is a non-renewable resource.
Right, so fossil fuels are a non-renewable resource. So hopefully there's a fossil fuel deposit somewhere else we could tap into for more energy. Or what's a better solution?
Find something else.
Right,
instead of-
tap into more renewable energy sources like solar, wind, etc. Okay? Now, some people might think that planting trees here will solve our problem. Do you think it would solve our problem fully?
It'll help, but it won't solve it.
Right, it might help, but it won't solve it. So it might take a few pom-poms, say, away from the atmosphere, but we still are going to have an atmosphere with more carbon than it's supposed to have. So the take-home message here is the 2 main human activities that are altering the terrestrial carbon cycle are deforestation and fossil fuel consumption, and that's putting a lot of CO2 into our atmosphere. And what's the result of that?
Global warming.
Global warming. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Good.